The Britain's Got Talent studio carried its familiar Saturday afternoon energy as Simon Cowell settled into his judge's chair for what he anticipated would be another routine day of auditions. It was a gray August afternoon in 2024, and the iconic red curtains framed the stage where countless dreams had been both realized and shattered over the years. Simon adjusted his signature black t-shirt and took a sip of his tea, mentally preparing himself for the parade of hopeful performers that awaited. At 64 years old, Simon had built his entire empire on his reputation as the entertainment industry's ultimate dream crusher. His ability to identify weakness, exploit vulnerability, and deliver devastating verdicts had made him both feared and wealthy. He had grown comfortable with his role as the final arbiter of artistic worth, believing that his harsh honesty served the greater good by weeding out those who weren't strong enough for professional success. He had never allowed himself to consider the cumulative weight of all the dreams he had destroyed over the decades. 5-year-old Ethan Williams from Liverpool was not scheduled to perform. He had come to watch the taping with his aunt, Michelle Williams, a music therapist who had brought her nephew during the school holidays as what she hoped would be an inspiring experience. Ethan was an unusually empathetic child with blonde hair and bright blue eyes that seemed to feel others' emotions as deeply as his own. He had grown up around his aunt's work helping people process trauma and loss through music, absorbing more understanding about emotional healing and human resilience than most adults possessed. What made Ethan's presence particularly significant was his recent experience with his own shattered dreams. Ethan had been passionate about drawing and had worked for months on a picture that he planned to enter in a children's art contest. When an adult family friend had harshly criticized his work, telling him he wasn't artistic and should find something he was actually good at, Ethan had been devastated. His aunt had spent weeks helping him process the emotional impact of having his creative aspirations crushed by someone he trusted. The audition process was running smoothly when a young violinist took the stage for what should have been an encouraging performance. The 19-year-old girl was clearly nervous, and when she struggled with a particularly challenging passage in her chosen piece, Simon's reaction was swift and brutal. "Stop, stop, stop," Simon barked, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "That was absolutely torturous to listen to. You've managed to take beautiful classical music and turn it into something that sounds like a dying animal." The young woman on stage froze, her violin still positioned under her chin as Simon's words hit her like physical blows. Her eyes immediately filled with tears as she processed the devastating critique. "I don't know who told you that you had the talent for professional music," Simon continued relentlessly, "but they did you a tremendous disservice. What I just witnessed wasn't just poor technique, it was an assault on the very concept of musical performance." Ethan watched from the audience as the young violinist's face transformed from nervous hope to complete devastation. He could see her dreams crumbling in real time, and it reminded him painfully of his own experience with cruel criticism. But unlike his situation, this was happening in front of millions of people. "Honestly," Simon pressed on, "you should seriously consider whether music is something you should be pursuing at all. This level of performance suggests that your time might be better spent in an entirely different field." The violinist began to sob openly, as Simon essentially told her to abandon her musical aspirations. Ethan felt something he had never experienced before, a kind of protective fury towards someone whose dreams were being murdered by an adult who seemed to take pleasure in the destruction. As Simon prepared to deliver what appeared to be a final crushing blow to the already devastated performer, Ethan slipped away from his aunt and walked toward the judge's panel with the determined steps of someone on a mission to protect others who couldn't protect themselves. "Mr. Simon," Ethan called out, his clear voice cutting through the studio. "Mr. Simon, I need to ask you something." Simon, irritated by the interruption during his critique, looked down at the small boy who had somehow approached his chair. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't." Ethan looked directly into Simon's eyes and asked with the devastating directness that only children possess, "Do you ever feel sorry for making dreams die?" The question hit Simon like a moral earthquake. The studio fell into complete silence as this 5-year-old essentially accused him of committing dream murder. The innocent way Ethan framed his harsh criticism as literally killing people's aspirations was both startling and undeniable. Simon felt something cold and uncomfortable settle in his stomach as he processed being asked to acknowledge the emotional carnage he had caused throughout his career. "What did you say?" Ethan repeated his question with the patient clarity of someone who genuinely wanted an answer. "I asked if you feel sorry for making dreams die. Because that lady was dreaming about being a musician, and you just killed her dream right in front of everyone." Simon felt his defensive responses failing him as this child described his behavior in terms of destruction rather than professional assessment. The idea that he was a dream killer rather than a quality controller was deeply disturbing. The entertainment industry requires high standards, Simon attempted, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Ethan's response revealed his understanding about the difference between helpful and harmful criticism. But there's a difference between helping someone get better and making them want to give up forever. My aunt says that when grown-ups crush children's dreams, it hurts them inside their hearts for a really long time. Simon felt his hands begin to tremble as this 5-year-old forced him to consider the long-term psychological impact of his approach rather than just its immediate entertainment value. "Ethan," Simon said, his voice becoming quieter, "what happened to you that makes you understand this?" Ethan's answer revealed his personal experience with dream destruction. "A grown-up told me I wasn't good at drawing, and that I should stop trying. It made me feel so sad that I threw away all my art supplies and didn't want to draw anymore. My aunt had to help me remember that one mean person doesn't get to decide if my dreams are real." Simon felt something crack inside his chest as this child shared his own experience of having aspirations crushed by adult cruelty. The parallel between Ethan's trauma and what happened on his show daily was devastating. And Ethan continued with the relentless honesty of childhood. "My aunt says that people who crush other people's dreams usually do it because they forgot what it feels like to have dreams of their own." Simon felt tears beginning to form as this 5-year-old suggested that his cruelty stemmed from his own disconnection from hope and aspiration. The idea that he had become someone who destroyed what he no longer possessed was overwhelming. "Ethan," Simon asked, his voice beginning to shake, "what would your aunt say about someone like me?" Ethan's response was delivered with the wisdom that comes from therapeutic environment exposure. "She would say that person probably needs to remember what it felt like to have dreams, and to care about other people's dreams as much as they care about being right." Simon felt his composure beginning to crumble as this child essentially told him that his behavior stemmed from emotional disconnection, and that healing required reconnecting with his own capacity for hope. Looking at the stage, Simon saw the young violinist still standing there, her dreams shattered, her confidence destroyed, her musical aspirations potentially ended forever because of his words. For the first time, he saw her not as a failed audition, but as a human being whose life he had just fundamentally altered. "I can't do this anymore," Simon said suddenly, standing up from his chair. "I can't sit here and destroy another person's dreams." The audience gasped as Simon walked away from the judges' table, abandoning his position mid-audition. Ethan watched as the man who had seemed so powerful and confident fled from the consequences of his own behavior. "Mr. Simon," Ethan called after him, "you don't have to keep making dreams die. You could help them grow instead." But Simon was already disappearing backstage, overwhelmed by the weight of decades of dream destruction and the possibility that he had become exactly what Ethan described, a killer of hope and aspiration. Backstage, Simon was inconsolable. The production team found him struggling to process what had just happened. This wasn't just professional criticism. This was a 5-year-old child holding up a mirror to the emotional carnage he had caused throughout his career. "He's right," Simon said through his tears. "That little boy is absolutely right. I have been killing dreams. I've been destroying people's hope and calling it entertainment." When clips of the interaction became public weeks later, they sparked international conversations about the responsibility that comes with influential platforms, the difference between constructive criticism and dream destruction, and the long-term psychological impact of public humiliation. More importantly for Simon personally, the encounter with Ethan became a catalyst for fundamentally reconsidering his role in people's creative journeys. "Ethan didn't just criticize my behavior," Simon would later say in interviews. "He made me see my career through the lens of human dreams and aspirations." That 5-year-old forced me to confront the fact that I had become someone who took pleasure in ending people's hopes. The conversation led Simon to begin working with therapists and dream counselors to understand how to provide honest feedback without destroying people's fundamental belief in their own potential. 6 months later, Simon invited Ethan and his aunt back to the show. Ethan was curious to see if Simon had learned to help dreams grow instead of making them die. "Do you still make dreams die?" Ethan asked with the same directness that had characterized their first meeting. Simon knelt down to Ethan's eye level, his expression genuinely remorseful. "I'm learning how to help people improve their dreams instead of destroying them, Ethan. You taught me that being honest doesn't require being cruel." Ethan smiled with satisfaction. "Good. My aunt says that the best teachers help people's dreams get stronger, not disappear." The story became a landmark moment in discussions about the responsibility of media figures, the impact of public criticism on aspiring artists, and the difference between maintaining standards and destroying hope. But But perhaps most importantly, the conversation demonstrated that sometimes the most important moral challenges come from those who understand the fragility of human dreams. In this case, a 5-year-old boy who had experienced dream destruction himself and who understood that protecting others' aspirations was more important than entertaining audiences with their destruction. Ethan's question about feeling sorry for making dreams die became a touchstone for Simon's transformation, reminding him that his words had the power to either nurture or destroy the very hopes that made life meaningful for aspiring artists.